Welcome to this webinar on what GDPR is all about and how to prepare for it, with a particular focus on how it will affect the CRM usage of small and medium-sized businesses. But first of all, a disclaimer: we aren't qualified lawyers, and if you have particular data compliance needs, you should seek proper legal advice. But let's get started. GDPR is a far-reaching piece of EC legislation designed to protect its citizens' privacy and data. It comes into force in May next year, but you need to start thinking about how it will affect you today. There's lots to get through, so we'll crack on. To understand GDPR, you need to understand what it is trying to achieve. Europeans see privacy in a completely different light than other countries, in particular the US. For Europeans, privacy is a human right. The European Commission sees itself much more on the side of the individual and the consumer, who they believe needs to be protected from powerful businesses with big lobbying budgets. GDPR is overtly designed to right this perceived imbalance and enshrines the doctrine that personal data belongs to the person, not to the business that collected it. This is a completely alien concept to most US businesses, so no wonder that it is greeted there with bafflement. But GDPR is coming, and as recent entanglements between the EC and the likes of Amazon and Google show, the EC is prepared to enforce its rules, and with GDPR it has particularly sharp teeth. It is also a rare example of the EC doing what the US often does, exporting domestic law internationally. There is a whole vocabulary of jargon in GDPR, some of which comes from previous data directives. One of the new ideas is that the data processor has obligations as well as the data controller. A data protection officer isn't a legal requirement for most businesses, although it would be as well to have at least one person who understands what GDPR is about. It is, however, mandatory for public organizations and organizations handling certain types of sensitive data, such as criminal and medical records. The definition of personal data is wide: any data that would allow a living individual to be identified, even indirectly. That includes business email addresses, but not generic ones such as info at, sales at, etc. And getting consent will be the biggest challenge for CRM users who want to send out newsletters. Most of the headlines you'll read about are about the size of the fines, 20 million euros or 4% of global revenues, whichever is the greater. But this will be as a last resort for persistent and large-scale offenders. What is more likely is that if you breach GDPR, the Information Commissioner's Office, the UK's regulatory body, the ICO, will send you a written warning. And if you ignore that, it may then insist on data policy audits and finally hit you with the fines. But the size of the fines do a good job at telling large companies they'd better take this seriously. Examples of recent flagrant data breaches are TalkTalk, Equifax, and Yahoo. And in the Equifax breach, 143 million people were affected. If they all joined together in a class action and were awarded $1,000 each, that would come to a total cost of $143 billion. A major part of GDPR is about safeguarding data and reporting data breaches should they occur. You need to review where all your data is and who has access to it. If you have spreadsheets of people's contact details littered throughout your organization, that'll be quite hard. Best to get it all in one place, like a CRM system where you can control it. It is also sensible to have a plan of what to do if you do suffer a breach, because if it happens you won't have time to think carefully about what to do. And also because if the ICO comes knocking on your door, it would look bad if you didn't have a written policy. The right to erasure is an extension of the previous right to be forgotten. This includes all the data on them that you have created, such as credit scoring. Remember, this is their data, not yours. How you maintain proof of deleting somebody's data when you've deleted it is currently undefined. Getting consent is the main area of concern for our CRM customers. Consent has to be granted by the individual to a defined organization for a defined range of services and products in a defined way. Consent needs to be explicit, no more pre-ticked boxes or small print. I'll show you some examples of how to do this in a minute. Right now, unless you already run a double opt-in process, you won't have consents for your existing mailing list. The only good news is that you don't need opt-in consent for your customers. An opt-out, such as an unsubscribe link, is okay. And of course, all this only applies to EC citizens. You don't need opt-in consent for anybody outside of the EC. Here's an example of an explicit opt-in checkbox. the box is unticked and the wording about what ticking it will mean is clear and unambiguous. Another way of gathering consents is via a double opt-in process that asks the recipient to confirm that they want to be on a mailing list. It has to be opt-in. You can't have an email saying, click here if you don't want to be on the mailing list. As a CRM vendor with European customers, we need to be GDPR compliant, so our customers can be compliant too. To be GDPR compliant, you need to make sure that all your data processes, CRM, mailing software, accounting, HR, etc., are themselves GDPR compliant. And that means that the data is stored in the EC and they have policies covering data breaches, information requests, and erasure. You also need to start gathering consents for both new contacts and the ones you already have on your mailing database, because otherwise you won't be allowed to send newsletters to them after the 25th of May next year. There is a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions about GDPR. Here are the main ones. All of these statements are false. You can hold data on EC citizens outside of the EC in only a limited number of countries that include Canada, New Zealand and Switzerland, not in the US nor Australia. B2B marketing is not exempt from prior opt-in except for existing customers and transactional emails such as invoices and sign-up links. GDPR applies to all organizations that hold personal data on EC citizens no matter where they are based. And Brexit will not affect GDPR because the UK will still be in the EC next May and the government has committed to following it afterwards. If you want more details on these points, check out our Frequently Asked Questions blog on GDPR. So what do you need to do to make your CRM compliant? And what are we as a CRM vendor going to do to help you? You'll want to start capturing consents before the May deadline, so we'll be releasing features to help you do that at the turn of the year. By the May deadline, we'll have additional features such as double opt-in and restricting emailing only to contacts who have consent. We'll be notifying customers of these features as they get released. Thanks for watching this webinar. If you want more details on the points discussed and other issues around GDPR as well, go to www.reallysimplesystems.com/blog and look for our GDPR entries.